Good afternoon, and thank you all very much for coming to the 2016 GAMA State of the Industry Briefing. We're so glad you're here today. I'm Mary Lynn Renkowitz, Director of Communications for the General Aviation Manufacturers Association. GAMA President and CEO Pete Bunce and GAMA Chairman Aaron Hilkemann will review a number of things today, including our 2015 year-end shipment numbers. And we're also going to be recognizing some of the wonderful ways that the general aviation community has been giving back in 2015. There will be some time for questions and answers after the presentation, but right now, let's go ahead and get started. So we'll bring up Pete and Aaron.
Well, thank you. It's always just fun for me to have this kickoff event of the year and to be able to have not only our board members here, but all our friends in the press and from our sister associations. And it's a particular honor for me to have my chairman this year, the president and CEO of Duncan Aviation, Aaron Hilkemann, to be with me on stage. Aaron?
Thanks, Pete. It's great to be here, and we're happy to share the results of 2015 and also some of the challenges and activities going on today in Washington.
Well, as we build this thing as both a review and outlook, I thought we'd start and just take a look at the progress on GAMA priorities that have been made in 2015. The first thing I'd like to start with is those of you that have been paying attention to press releases in the last couple of days that don't involve ATC and FAA reauthorization, you've noticed that a big decision was made up in Montreal dealing with the CO2 standard. Now, GAMA put forth in 2008 a commitment to be able to help develop this standard because we recognize that if we did not do it, the airlines would develop a standard on their own that would probably not impact us favorably in being able to develop new product. And our scientists and our engineers went to work from our OEMs, and this now 6-year process of developing that standard culminated with the CAPE meetings this past week. Ed Smith on our staff just got back last night and reported to our finance committee this morning that this standard has been accepted, and you'll get details about it later. It's very technical, so I won't go into all of those, but this standard is something that business aviation is definitely a participant in, that it fits the way we build aircraft, the number of people that we have on board the aircraft, and it is truly great that they've been able to go and establish this standard, working with our brethren that are in the commercial world, and be able to put that forward to the full General Assembly for acceptance later this year. Let's look at the next point that GAMA has been working very hard on, and that's being able to get recognition before the states of design around the planet that deal with business and general aviation aircraft on how you certify and how you leverage off of each other's competencies. There's 4 states of design, obviously represented by the FAA here, Transport Canada, north of the border, EASA for all of Europe, to include our Pilatus, which certifies their aircraft through the Swiss authorities, but works very closely with the EASA in that process. And of course, Embraer works very closely with ANAC in Brazil. So those 4 states of design all have bilaterals with one another. But the key for us is to be able to leverage those bilaterals so we don't have engineers checking engineers checking engineers. And we've been able to make great progress in that effort, and that will continue as we go forward because it's good for the government and it's obviously good for industry. Another thing that is happening right now that is very important that those of us here in the U.S. sometimes can lose sight of is that there's a complete review of the EASA basic regulation. Now, EASA's been in place for a little over 10 years now. What they're doing is they're fully revamping the way they are looking at how EASA regulates safety in Europe. This is as big a deal as FAA reauthorization is over here. And what we've been working hard toward and what we've seen success through the great relationships that we have built with the EASA staff and the EASA director, Patrick Key, is the fact that we are now looking toward regulating business and general aviation on a proportional basis, which steps up the level of safety and the risk management versus regulating it all to the highest common denominator as you would with the airlines. There are also very many other elements in this basic regulation that will help us. But if you just look at the proportionality aspects of this basic regulation, this is important stuff, and it's moving forward now to the European Commission and the European Parliament for adoption. Along with that, the next item is technical standards orders and European technical standards orders. We had a huge win last year by mutual acceptance between EASA and FAA of each other's TSOs and ETSOs. What does that do? For industry, saves millions of dollars. Again, no duplication of effort between the authorities, but it's really the first step. It is the foundational piece with which now we build upon. The next step is mutual recognition of each other's supplemental type certificates on the simple side, and then to the more complex side. Where do we go after that? Then we move up to actual certification of aircraft. So if we have an aircraft certified up by Transport Canada, that the FAA will accept that and not do the engineers, checking engineers piece to that. This is big, and we'll keep pushing on that. And then finally over in Europe, single engine IMC for commercial operations. This has been a 10-year effort. And quite frankly, although the safety data, we could put safety data in front of regulators and say, you cannot show us how flying a single engine turbine over in Europe is any more dangerous than a twin engine turbine. There was just a natural bias against it. Well, we've broken through that, and EASA has put forward a change that will allow single engine commercial operations, and now we've got to bring some countries over there that are still somewhat skeptical on board, but this has been really a breakout of being able to go and address this issue. So now let's focus here at home on a few things from last year. First of all, you're all familiar with the export-import bank fight that we had last year, and we're very proud to say that there are a lot of groups, a lot of companies, a lot of associations that work this problem hard. It's just crazy how politics works in Washington and who was for it and who was against it, but in the end, I think the righteousness prevailed, and we got reauthorization of the Export-Import Bank. That's huge for the whole ecosystem of aviation, civil aviation in the United States, to provide a level playing field across the planet so that all countries can compete fairly with their export financing. When we look at another key thing that happened during the budget deal, assurance that the R&D tax credit is permanent. You all know that the lifeblood of our industry for manufacturers is to produce new product. And for us as manufacturers to be able to sit there and have confidence that year after year we will get that R&D tax credit so we can invest more dollars in the development of that new product is huge. In addition, for our customers and our ability to sell to those customers, to be able to have bonus depreciation now assured. Before what happened, we would get it right at the 11th hour, right during the beginning of December, and that did us virtually no good to be able to entice customers to be able to take advantage of bonus depreciation. Now, we've got it codified. It'll be a 5-year phase out, but we know exactly what we can sell to on how to entice our customers to be able to take advantage of that. ADS-B equipage. Another huge issue. We were all here last year at this time talking about the importance of getting moving on ADS-B. What has happened? The Equip 2020 group has met. Great help from not only our sister associations, but Jens Henning on our staff has played a key role in organizing it to be able to allay the fears that everyone had out there, to try to work the issues, to be able to say, yes, the mandate's going to be fixed. We need to start equipping aircraft. It's not going to change past basically December 31st, 2019, and we've got to move forward. We're happy to say that there's a lot of equipage that has happened, but it's not enough. So last year at this time, we had about 10,000 aircraft equipped. Now we got 19,000 aircraft equipped. Is that enough? No. And as we get closer and closer to the mandate, what's going to happen? Industrial capacity, supply and demand is going to take over, and the cost is going to go up. So we call on our friends in the press and our sister associations to beat the drum and tell people it is going to cost you more if you wait. You need to do this. And when we all look at what's happening with unmanned vehicles, you will want to have ADS-B on your aircraft if you're flying in airspace that requires it, to make sure those little suckers don't run into you. The last thing that we're really paying attention to is developing the workforce of the future. We've paired with groups like the National Association of Manufacturers and AIA and other groups to be able to sit there and say, look at our aging workforce and what skills do we need in that workforce of the future to be able to do our maintenance, to be able to work out on our factory floors, to be able to be the engineers that develop those new products. So we work that hard. We've now got a good picture of where we need to go, and in this next year you're going to see a lot of work being able to be done by different organizations to try to address that. I'm very proud of the fact that our GAMA member companies have joined together and said, let's make a difference at the high school level, and we have the Aviation Design Challenge that keeps growing each and every year. We provide that software, and that's the holy grail, that educators use this software to be able to train a team of kids, with the prize being that one of those teams gets to go out to Arlington, Washington in June to be able to actually build the aircraft that they redesign. Not in their redesign, but the Glass Air Sportsman. And we're very proud to partner with Glass Air once again this year for our 4th build. So with that, that's kind of a quick summation of where we've come from. I'd like to ask Aaron to go into the numbers.
Okay, so we're going to review shipments and billings for the 3 different segments that we've broken into. So we have piston, turboprop, and jet, and we'll try to go through each of those separately. To start with piston. This graph shows from 2004 through 2015 the number of shipments. You can see for 2015 we were down 6.5% at just a little over 1,000 units. In terms of billings, you can see we were down not quite as much, 5.3%. The segmentation in terms of the market distribution of these, and it's a very similar story for almost each product line, but we've seen the international markets decline. In this case, it shows a little bit of an increase with Asia Pacific, but if you take in consideration the decline in the number of units, the units were basically flat in Asia. In all the other markets, they were down, and offsetting a portion of that was the increase in the North American market. So the North American market has absorbed some of the decline in the international market, but not enough to keep us the market growing. On the turboprop market, again, you're seeing a decline of about 7.6%, down to 557 units in 2015. But a decline in this one a little bit greater, 10.8%. Down to 1.65 billion. So what you're seeing there are some of the higher end turboprops. They're declining a little bit more than some of the less expensive ones. Market distribution, very similar story as the piston market. A decrease in all the international portion of the market, offsetting that, a 5% increase in the North America market. On the jet side, there's a little bit of a, we're going to explain a little bit to get this apples and apples. Bombardier has not released their 4th quarter delivery information. And so the little, you can see a little bubble or a little partial bar on 14. That's the actual results in 14 before we have the information for 15. So what we've done is, so it's in the same comparison, we've taken out the 2014 delivery for Bombardier for the 4th quarter because it's not included in in 2015. We will be getting their information next week, and then we'll put it online so that we'll have full, complete information available to everybody in a week. So excluding that 4th quarter deliveries, in 2015 we had an increase of 1.6% on the jet market in terms of shipments, but there was a decline of about 6.6%, down to 18 billion on the billings. And what the story there is, the light jets were down and the large jets were down. The mid-size was up, but it wasn't enough to offset the decline in the large and the light that occurred. So that's why the billings have declined, even though we have increased number of jet deliveries in 2015. We do not have a market distribution at this point in time. It will be available next week after we receive the information from Bombardier. But it is if you just look at it in general terms, we have shifted about 10% from international into the North American market, similar to the piston and turboprop market as well, in terms of distribution of that product. The rotorcraft market, we have 2 segments, the piston and the turbine. We'll start with the piston. We had an 8.6% increase in the shipments of the piston rotorcraft, but a decline of about 5.9% in billings. And primarily related to, we had some new entrants, low-cost entrants into the piston market that drove the volume up, but the dollars weren't there on the higher end, so the overall decline in overall billings. On the turbine market for rotorcraft, we have a similar story to Bombardier. We do not have Finmecanica's numbers for the fourth quarter of 2014. So we're going to remove that information for 14 as well as, since it's not available for 15, and excluding Finmecanica, we have an 8.9% decline in the turbine market and a larger decline in billings. And again, that is on the large end of the turbine helicopters, and it's easy to see the decline related to the oil and gas segment, where a lot of those shipments have gone to in the past. So that kind of concludes the wrap-up of the billings and shipments for 2015. Pete's going to be talking about some of the challenges for 2016. What I thought I'd do is just spend a minute to reflect on the last reauthorization bill in 2012. For the general aviation manufacturers, there were two important segments in the 2012 Modernization Act, and that related to Section 312 and 313. 312 dealt with the streamlining of certification efforts, and 313 dealt with the consistency of interpretation for regulations that we had. The industry, or I should say the FAA, has made progress in both of those segments, but I would say has also not moved the needle as far as we would like. And so this new reauthorization bill does give us the opportunity to further strengthen and build on that foundation that we had in Section 312 and 313, to continue on those recommendations as well as implementation of those recommendations, so that we can see some significant impact to the general aviation manufacturers. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pete. Thank you.
Well, as Aaron said, 312 and 313 are important to us, but not the only thing. So let's dissect this FAA reauthorization proposal and talk about some good things and some things that we want to see addressed and that we have some concerns about. So as Aaron alluded to, the first of those is certification. Now, 312 in the last reauthorization talked about that streamlining, but we as manufacturers don't feel that the FAA has gone far enough. And to that end, Chairman Schuster, a year and a half ago, called GAMA, along with Mother Boeing, together in a room to have a listening session to be able to talk about what's not working right in certification. He followed that up with several other listening sessions, and the result of that is what we see in the bill. Some very strong language about improving certification and streamlining. And let me highlight a few of those in there. Right now, when we have what we call ODA, Organizational Designation Authorization, we basically spend a lot of money as manufacturers. The FAA administrator blesses us as having these delegated authorities, and yet the specialists out in the workforce don't allow us to use all of those delegated authorities. And they're able to just decide on their own and say, no, you can have this, but you're not going to get this. And what this bill says is no, that's not how it's going to work. You have to go up your chain of command and give written, full justification to be able to say anything that they're going to withhold from an ODA, a company that's proved its competence. And why that is so important is for all of our companies that don't have an ODA, then that frees up more FAA resources to be able to take care of their products. So this is extremely important. It also codifies a dispute resolution process. One thing we worry about as manufacturers is that if we go and elevate a situation to, let's say, headquarters level of the FAA, that we may get our way on the first project, but there's going to be hell to pay and some reciprocity on the next one when we're working with that specialist. What this does is it just says, as a normal course of action, if you have a dispute, it's going to be able to be elevated, and there's not going to be any recrimination against any manufacturer or a FAA safety specialist that would do that. It also puts a strong emphasis on performance metrics from the FAA. We've rolled out this thing that we call the ODA scorecard, and we're going to keep refining that, but it's going to be important to provide real metrics back to the FAA and to the industry to be able to tell how we were doing and how we're improving on these projects. Also, it goes and it further tells the FAA that they need to continue this effort to be able to leverage other authorities on validations. This is our lifeblood. We are wasting too much time and effort, as well as the regulatory authorities, to be able to do these engineers checking engineers. So the Congress has recognized this, said, come on, get after it. And the last thing that's very important is recognition of airworthiness directives that come from other authorities. So if we have something that comes out of EASA or Transport Canada or ANAC, right now the FAA spends a whole lot of time going through a mini rulemaking process and a lot of time to be able just to issue an AD. And it's a waste of time. We want to have this recognition between competent authorities. So that's something very good. Now let's move on to the 313 piece that Aaron talked about. Very important part of GAMA is our maintenance, repair, and overhaul organizations. In 313, two of the unrealized things that the FAA has not delivered on right now is first, as we talk about consistency and regulatory interpretation, is having a central library where we don't have to search through emails and circulars and all these interpretations that have happened over time to figure out what really is the current policy. What this does is it mandates the FAA to make it happen and make it searchable not only for FAA specialists, but for us in industry. So we can go to the next step that this bill talks about, which is a coordination communications board, basically, that allows us to pick up the phone when we have a dispute and be able to elevate it very quickly in a certain amount of time to a higher authority to get resolution so we can get on with the project. Because as you know, and you've heard me talk about before, a lot of times we'll just say, if that's the way you want it, we'll do it. We don't agree with it, but we've got to get this product out there. And it causes us a lot more work and a lot of consternation, and we want to get rid of that. So these are important elements. There's also taking away or taking and moving a little bit from manufacturers and OEMs. Let's talk about other things in the bill that we like. Third class medical. There's some really good language in this bill that we as manufacturers, along with our sister associations, feel passionately about, and I don't need to belabor it because you all are very familiar with it. In addition to that, let's talk about the Piston Aviation Fuels Initiative. The only way we are going to be successful to move this industry to an unleaded fuel is to have fleet-wide approvals for the fuel that we finally certify. And what this bill does, because there's some reluctance in the FAA to want to do it because basically they've never done it before. And this bill directs the FAA that this is what you'll do. When you arrive at a fuel, you'll give a fleet-wide approval. That really helps us be able to solve the problem. And last but certainly not least, this bill embraces some new technological ideas out there. And one thing that we have scratched our head about is why the FAA has been slow to embrace remote towers. We can do a lot of good things. In fact, we improve safety by the filters that we can put on these screens. The NATCA controllers like it. They've been out to Leesburg to be able to look at it. It's a great capability that's already been deployed over in Europe to great success, is expanding there, and we want to see it happen, and Congress does too. And so we're glad to see that that's in the bill. So let's now dissect some other parts of the bill that we have some concerns about. In the fall of last year, after our GAMA board meeting, we sent a letter to the top four, the leaders of both Senate Commerce and for House T&I, and said these are our concerns. And the first of which, of course, is certification. And on the left side of this page, we talked a lot about certifications. And I feel very good that those concerns were addressed. But on the second page, there were 3 paragraphs that we want to have a further look at with the bill that has been introduced. And the first of those deals with user fees. Now, you've all heard all of us from the GA Association talking about user fees for years. This bill doesn't address 135 and the user fees on 135. And the other thing that concerns us is the fact that there is no agreement right now with House Ways and Means, which is the taxing committees, that if user fees were imposed and the bill calls for a weight distance type of ICAO-based formula, that all those taxes, or at least some of those taxes that currently are imposed on 135, which 135 pays a ticket tax, segment fee, small fuel tax, that those taxes would go away. And we are concerned about that. The next item is, to me, the holy grail, and it's the most important item, and that's access. The way that the board is envisioned to be structured is that all of these, and these are just a few of the associations that have an interest in the national airspace system, the way it is structured that once the board is put in place, 4 associations have the ability to appoint 11 members to this board. Now, you see those 4 associations up there. All folks that run those associations I know. I'm a proud member of AOPA. Mark is here in the room with us, but Mark has concerns over AOPA having the 2 appointed seats for general aviation, because who's not represented there? There's a lot. We don't have the GA airports. Greg is back here, NASAO. We don't have technologists or manufacturers. We don't have those that would represent our FBOs out there. So it's very hard to even understand how the function of this board would operate, because there's nothing specified that there's going to be a majority decision that can take place, a supermajority, unanimity, what is required. But more importantly than that, what happens if you look at who's on this board? 5 of those seats are comprised for the airlines between ALPA and A4A that designates that. What happens if all of a sudden they take slots that are at some of the airports that the airlines have, and all of a sudden they say, you can't have those slots anymore. We're going to outvote you. Or what happens when you look at access and you look at this ecosystem out there of aviation? What happens when these airlines say, we don't want to grow capacity? We're making money, and I guarantee you they're making good money right now. We make money out of constraining the system. And we all know there's been consolidations and contraction in the airline industries to build or to raise the load factors. So we've got some problems with this, but when you look at it in even a macro sense, if you are setting up a public service board, would you not set it up so that if you have the public's interest in mind, you'd probably put a human resources person on there to handle that great large controller workforce? Would you put a technologist on it to be able to implement next gen? Would you put somebody that's able to handle finances so that you've got experts in finance so that you really know how the dollars that you're going to collect through this user fee system are most widely invested? So as you would set up a board that could function and actually protect everyone's interest in there, we do not see that this formula is something that cannot not be modified. We need to work on that formula there. And the last thing that concerns us, in the 3rd paragraph in our letter, talked about what do no harm, and basically what happens if you fragment. So let's take a look at what would happen if we break the ATC out of the FAA. Basically, the ATC portion, about 3/4 of the workforce goes away. But we all know the part that we as manufacturers and us as pilots, the part that we have the most consternation with is the part that remains, the safety piece. But if we're talking about next gen being a reason to do this, and if we want to move next gen forward, most of the ground infrastructure has been put in place now for next gen. All the ADS-B ground stations are in place in the United States, and ERAM, although it had problems, is now deployed. Now we're working on communications contracts to be able to facilitate all what's on the ground, but that is in place. What's left, what remains? It is equipping aircraft, and it's that small part of the FAA, the safety part of the FAA, that has to work with the ATO part to make that happen, and there's no better case than 2020 and Equip 2020 and the problems that we've had with ADS-B and making sure that everyone is accommodated with this mandate going forward. If you fragment it, you cause what we would consider problems in communications between those entities. And where do we see that? We saw that in Europe recently, where they tried to deploy Datacom. You have Eurocontrol and you have EASA, and what happened? It failed. So we have some concerns there. But another concern is, who's going to manage that big piece that's cleaved off? Well, it's the Department of Transportation. As far as I know, I have a hard time walking over to DOT and finding people that understand the acronym CPDLC, ADS-B, understand the principles behind Datacom, understand what we want to do with ADS-B in and out or fans, and that what happens? We are going to have to build some type of additional bureaucracy within the DOT to be able to manage this piece that is broken off. So is that really what we want to do, is create more bureaucracy? So we have concerns of just how you move next gen forward. We're going to encapsulate all of these as we work the process. But legislation in Washington is like making sausage. You all know that. Okay? We are in the first set of downs of the first quarter of a ball game here. And if you look at the players involved that we addressed in our letter, you look at the authorizing committees. So we're only looking at the top half of this slide, the authorizers that are in the House of Representatives. And we all know we had a fiery hearing this morning. It may still be going on over there, where there were members from both parties expressing their concerns about the bill. But once markup happens, if markup happens tomorrow, which it probably should, there'll be amendments. We don't know what it'll look like coming out of markup, but there's more to this process. The tax committees, any tax title or any adjustment to this bill has to go through House Ways and Means, and then of course Senate Finance when the Senate takes up the bill. House Ways and Means, as they indicated the other day, really hadn't had a look at the bill. So we don't know how they're going to view in this, but we are hearing some skepticism over what it looks like right now. And of course there are the appropriators. We have heard from the appropriators, both House and Senate, who've said they've got some true concerns about the way this is structured right now. That's got to play out. And then in addition to that, you have other groups. You have a caucus already formed within the Democratic Party that's got concerns about this, as well as the Freedom Caucus on the far right of the House of Representatives. So suffice it to say, just in the House, there are many quarters still to play in this game before we even get over to the Senate. And we at GAMA will be working hard to be able to talk about the great things that are in this bill and also the things that concern us. We'll be able to address some questions when we get to Q&A here further on the bill. But what we always do at this press conference is talk about the groups that give back, because I believe this is the greatest part of our industry, to be able to look at the generosity of corporate America and the hard work that our volunteer organizations do to be able to give back. So let's look at a few of those groups. I'd like to start off with the Veterans Airlift Command. If you look at what happened in 2015, fairly impressive there. 1,600 members flew on missions provided by quite a few volunteer pilots out there, providing phenomenal service to men and women that will need medical care throughout the rest of their lives and have to have a way to get back and forth to the centers of excellence for VA and military care. 11,000 passengers from the inception, and when you look at how VAC spends their money, 95% of their resources directly back to making those missions happen. We're very proud of them. Corporate Angel Network. I think Peter is in the audience right over here. We are proud sponsors of Corporate Angel Network. Many of our companies serve on the CAN board. Since its founding, you look at those impressive numbers there, and it's just 2,500 patients just in 2015 alone, 530 corporations providing seats to those cancer patients around the country. And then we're very excited about arriving at this mark of 50,000 passengers served there, or patients served in those flights. So we're excited about that. Now moving on to the Recreational Aviation Foundation. We have a passion for the fun that's in flying, and all of us share that. We're very proud of the fact, and Alan and Joe Mesler are here representing the RAF. We're very proud of the fact that this organization has matured now to the point that they're really making an impact here in Washington. This organization that started out in the west of this country, signing MOUs with not only the Forest Service but the BLM to be able to provide dollars to preserve airstrips instead of shut them down. And that's really an accomplishment that we need to be proud of. And that's the tip of the iceberg, because now in the Ozarks in a few months, the first airfield is going to be constructed of several that are going to go in place through grants, through some generous donors, but a partnership with the Nature Conservancy. And I could have never anticipated that we in general aviation could partner with the Nature Conservancy to be able to put in airfields to provide aviation access to land that's out there so people can recreate on it, and they don't have to tear up the land getting to and from it, because we have a very small footprint when we go and build an airfield out there. So this is exciting stuff, and we're very proud. Well, the last thing I'd like to do today before we get to Q&A is talk about a seminal accomplishment last year. And our GAMA companies were very generous to be able to support the Arsenal of Democracy World War II flyover that celebrated the 70th anniversary of the victory in Europe. And we have another event coming up here at Pearl Harbor, which will be the 75th anniversary of the Pearl Harbor attack. But we wanted to go and highlight some things that happened this summer with our partners. And I'd like to ask my partners of the associations to come up as we recognize a few stellar performers from the federal government that helped us make that happen. So John Cuddy, Steve Brown, Mike Ginter, can you all come up here? This was a Herculean effort. And as we tried to brainstorm between us to be able to figure out how to make this happen and how to facilitate the change, we really said we need some federal partners. And so as we got together, and that, Mike in particular said, well, I've got this buddy, J.J. Johnson, and he's the guy we need to start talking to because he is the FAA man that can go and coordinate these organizations together. And what J.J. did is he got everybody together, got everybody on the same page and said, we are all in this. We are for it. And they became as passionate about this as we did. So we'd like to ask J.J. to come on up. You guys. John.
My organization is the International Council of Air Shows, and at our convention in Las Vegas in December, the board of directors presented the federal facilitators as the team came to be known with its Special Achievement Award. Not everybody could make that trip out to Vegas, so we want to make that presentation here today to JJ on behalf of the whole federal facilitating team, and in particular the FAA.
And of course, the FAA wasn't alone in that effort. We had to have TSA involved. We had to vet everybody that was associated with this to be able to go and have the entry access, so we knew exactly who was going out to the airplanes at both Manassas and at Culpeper to be able to make this happen. And Bruce Brown from the TSA was the man that really facilitated that, got his whole team together. And I'll tell you, there was some scrutiny out on the flight line that we had to work through and everything, and Bruce helped us. So Bruce, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, think about flying a bunch of World War II aircraft that still have guns on them. Now, albeit demilitarized guns and that, but you got to make sure that that happens because we're flying within 1 mile of the White House. And we got everybody and their brother out on the mall. And those of you that were there, you know how packed the mall was. The freeways all around Washington were shut down, especially going up the Potomac as the aircraft came down. But we had to have the Secret Service involved, and Forrest Pruitt made it happen for us, got his team out there with the dogs, and I was just absolutely, just totally jazzed by the fact that they could get this done and get it done expeditiously, having the crews open up all the compartments to be able to let them get through this quick so that we can make our launches on time. Forrest, thank you so much for making that happen. So with that, I think that we're going to open it up to questions. And I think we got mics available for folks. So raise your hand and don't be bashful. Murray.
The big question is, how can we spur on more general aviation sales? Piston, turboprop, jet, and how can we make that happen?
Well, I think it's a multi-pronged approach. We work very closely with our sister associations. Mark and I, there's some language in the bill to be able to do some retrofit of certified aircraft to provide more modern technology to them, because we've got to appeal to young people there. But one of the things I'm most excited about, and I'd actually like Aaron to say a few words about the meeting that we had yesterday with our EPIC committee.
Oh, The EPIC committee is our latest within GAMA, and it stands for Electrical Propulsion Innovation, an innovation committee. And we had probably 8 new members of GAMA and 25 participants there, and all of which trying to find a way to use electric propulsion in aviation. But to your question, Murray, I guess I think the answer is we need to have businesses, startup businesses. If you look at what the recession did to us, it took out a lot of small businesses across the nation. What has been the growth of aviation and general aviation and people moving up? It's the startup of companies and the growth of those companies into new markets. And so I think we need confidence in the economy, we need confidence in our leadership, and then people will be more comfortable in buying and ordering more jets and more piston, more turboprops.
I want to add to that EPIC committee, one thing that was so cool to see our conference room full of not only these companies that are researching electric and hybrid propulsion, but all of the other GAMA member companies that want to be part of it. And these are not small companies. So there is a future in this, and if it develops the way we hope, we might see the 1930s again, because the sky's the limit, so to speak, on our ability to be able to do new things with power generation, but also with basic aerodynamic design when you're blowing air over wings.
Pete, the fight over the Ex-Im Bank was astonishing, frankly, but there was really hard language before it finally passed, and determination on the part of some Republicans to bring it to the fore again if they come to power. How secure is the legislation now? What's the life of Ex-Im Bank, and what's the threat, the level of threat?
Well, you're absolutely right, Bill. We cannot rest on the fact that this is just reauthorized for a finite period of time. And we got a very nice note from Chairman Hochberg back to the GAMA board that I'll present to him later today, just saying how much he appreciated our ability to focus on exactly what Aaron was talking about, the smaller businesses. Everybody was focusing, obviously, on the large end, but we all, as Joe pointed out in his testimony last year, we're an ecosystem and we all share suppliers and everything, so we have to work this problem, and we've got to make sure that people understand how important this bank is. It took on a kind of a surreal focus as to who was opposed to it and who was for it, and really what broke it free was the fact with Speaker Boehner's retirement, it provided a window for a bunch of Republicans to get together and say, this is just crazy. And normally a discharge petition basically says your chairmen aren't doing their jobs. But because there was so much turmoil there, they could bring it forward, and then once we knew it could go to a vote, we knew it would pass, because those that were stymieing it and keeping it down in committee weren't able to exercise their power to keep it there. So those conditions may not exist later, so we've got to be able to tell our stories, and really, quite frankly, we need to tell it to the very conservative companies that are out there in corporate America that had the wrong impression that this is some type, they use that term crony capitalism in that, which just doesn't make sense. So we've got to do a better job at that, and we'll be doing that in our state rallies.
Pete, Robert Goyer with Plane and Pilot. I was wondering about the way that you were discussing the privatization of ATC. Almost made it sound as though you feel it's a fait accompli, and it seems if that happens, if it is instituted, that we in GAA are going to have limited power to have a real voice and to control our destiny with that. Where are we at with that? Is that the case? Do you think we have to manage it at this point, or can we just stop it in its tracks still? Well,
I think, Robert, the part that I was pointing out is we're so early in the ballgame. This is Chairman Schuster's proposal. As you've seen today play out, there's a lot of forces that disagree with this proposal. So what do? Do you just sit there and say, no, status quo is good? Well, we as an industry, everybody together has said that right now the FAA is not delivering to industry the way we want. So we've made that message, and Congress is listening to it. So what our job is to be able to preserve what's good in the bill, and there is a lot of good in the bill, and to be able to modify what is not to our liking. Now, whether that involves going ahead and shaping it in a different way as it moves through the process by amending it on the floor and then going and working it on the Senate side, or whether through all the forces that are at play right now, whether it even gets out of committee in the form, we don't know. We don't know what this will look like tomorrow if it gets out of markup, and we certainly know it's not going to look like it looks now when it gets done on the House floor. So this is a legislative process that we've seen many times before. It's a little bit different situation that we had a couple reauthorizations ago, where we had the Aetna campaign and the blip is a blip and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of changes that can happen during the process, and what we want to do is be able to have an open dialogue with Republicans and Democrats up there to be able to talk about this bill.
Pete, back to your comments on XM and what appears to be, from the numbers presented today, the largest contraction in our markets were overseas. Are there other factors other than temporary loss of XM that are playing a part of that? And is there anything GAMA can or is doing about those factors?
Absolutely. And Jim, this is Jim Hirsch from Air Tractor, one of our proud members, and of course Jim's company, and we called on Jim to testify a lot around on the Hill of the impact of XM financing on what he produces out there. As we look at the markets around the world, it's really interesting because after the downturn, the BRIC countries were the real play. You know, the U.S. economy was doing poorly. Companies were sitting there going, can I have a business jet and that? So where do we go? We went to China, we went to Brazil, we went to Russia, a little bit in India. That's still a market that's an enigma. But what's happened? Russian sanctions, oil's collapsed, oil dollars down significantly. In China, their economy, although it's still humming along, is not growing at the rate it was. But more concerning there is the Chinese government has put a lot of scrutiny on high net worth individuals that, oh, by the way, had bought business jets, not because they're putting scrutiny on the business jets, just that basically what's happening. Well, the leader there is purging all the people that don't agree with him. Purging may be a little strong word, but that's really, they're putting in place their team over there, and general aviation hasn't taken off as much as we had hoped over in China. But obviously, you sold a lot of aircraft over there, but the Chinese economy is not what it was before. And then we go to Brazil. Brazil economy is not nearly what it was before. They're having significant problems. And so when you look at Brazil offshore oil, that was spurring a lot of our turbine rotorcraft, but also in their ag industry, that was a great market. And with their economic turmoils right now, that hits us. So we are a slave to this global economy. We're a global industry. And I think we underestimated the impact of energy dollars within our industry. It's very easy to say turbine, rotorcraft, they're going to be affected. There are not as many rigs or oil fields that we're going to go out to. But I think energy dollars also impacted the large cabin and long range production, and we're seeing that somewhat in the numbers. So we are a slave to this greater economy, and the best thing we can do is, while this U.S. economy is still growing, albeit not the way as robustly as we want, to be able to keep telling people, refresh your aircraft, use your business jet, and use that to be able to make business, because right now the U.S. and North America is becoming an increasing part of that. Anything else? All right, well, it's great to have you all with us today. Our members will be around for a little bit to talk to members of the press. I appreciate John, Steve, Mike, to be with us, for our great partners in the federal government for the flyover. And Peter and Alan, thank you for being here representing the RAF and CAN. Thank you very much.